in the member countries.
Since the 1950s, WMO has pulled together its members from 191 states and territories to address the common challenges brought on by natural hazards.
No one country in meteorology can do this alone. It was recognized more than a century ago, and since then, the World Meteorological Organization provides essential leadership in cooperation globally, so every country would have contribution and also access to the global information and global services. We are operating the global public good system where many nations take responsibility to help others in exchanging prediction and sharing knowledge.
The critical importance of WMO is that to serve as a framework of collaboration which allow members under the same standard and the same format, which enable people can understand each other. The key factor WMO members contribute to the disaster risk reduction is the improvement of weather forecasting accuracy. Now we can reach the same accuracy at 7 days with a 90% of confidence and in the weather pattern. They say that's the science. The real advancement. All the governments, all the partners can rely on this information to take actions.
In 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, requested by the government of Vietnam, WMO organized an emergency response team comprises of the Weather Service of China, Hong Kong, China, and also the regional center in Japan. And the evacuation of some 600,000 people was very effective in mitigating the hazard arising from Typhoon Haiyan.
WMO provides regional and global support to all its members, each at different stages of socio-economic development.
So in more developed countries, systems are in place, early alerts are in place, there's good response systems, but in many developing countries and small island states, these systems are not in place. So the poverty and the lack of governance structures actually exacerbates the impact of disasters quite disproportionately.
It's an encouraging fact that if we look at trends currently, less people die from disasters than they did 10 years ago. However, that trend is not homogeneous across all countries. And there are a number of countries, and particularly low-income countries and small island developing states, where that trend is reversed. That means that the number of people losing their lives to disasters is actually trending up. And that is very much the rationale behind this new initiative that WMO and a number of partners have launched called CRUISE, where we're trying to help bridge the gap between some of the more advanced countries and those countries which don't have those systems in place.
中国内地，我们承担了22个就世界气象局的中心，通过这些中心呢，来把我们的技术辐射出去，并且通过这个中心呢，来帮助其他发展中国家来加强能力方面的建设。我们中国政府每年提供奖学金，就请他们来参加留学。我们还承担了世界气象组织的2个区域培训中心，来帮助发展中国家来提升它的人力资源这个能力。
One can look up to see a piece of the blue sky. But together, we can see the skies of the Earth.
WMO, we are really grateful and honored to be winners of the LUI Prize 2018, and we are planning to use the resources to enhance the global disaster risk reduction capacity, and especially support our developing country members in improving their service capability.
Over the past 2 decades, changing climate has intensified natural disasters all over the world, because hazards in one place are causally linked to weather conditions in the others.
We are the United Nations Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate and Water, and we are dealing with the national meteorological and hydrological services, which are responsibility for early warnings of short-term weather events or climate issues and water resource management in the member countries.
Since the 1950s, WMO has pulled together its members from 191 states and territories to address the common challenges brought on by natural hazards.
No one country in meteorology can do this alone. It was recognized more than a century ago, and since then, the World Meteorological Organization provides essential leadership in cooperation globally. So every country would have contribution and also access to the global information and global services. We are operating the global public good system where many nations take responsibility to help others in exchanging prediction and sharing knowledge.
The critical importance of WMO is that to serve as a framework of collaboration which allow members under the same standard and the same format, which enable people can understand each other. The key factor WMO members contribute to the disaster risk reduction is the improvement of weather forecasting accuracy. Now we can reach the same accuracy at 7 days with a 90% of confidence and in the weather pattern. They say that's the science. The real advancement. All the governments, all the partners can rely on this information to take actions.
In 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, requested by the government of Vietnam, WMO organized an emergency response team comprises of the Weather Service of China, Hong Kong, China, and also the regional center in Japan. And the evacuation of some 600,000 people was very effective in mitigating the hazard arising from Typhoon Haiyan.
WMO provides regional and global support to all its members, each at different stages of socio-economic development.
So in more developed countries, systems are in place, early alerts are in place, there's good response systems, but in many developing countries and small island states, these systems are not in place. So the poverty and the lack of governance structures actually exacerbates the impact of disasters quite disproportionately.
It's an encouraging fact that if we look at trends currently, less people die from disasters than they did 10 years ago. However, that trend is not homogeneous across all countries. And there are a number of countries, in particular low-income countries and small island developing states, where that trend is reversed. That means that the number of people losing their lives to disasters is actually trending up. And that is very much the rationale behind this new initiative that WMO and a number of partners have launched called Cruise, where we're trying to help bridge the gap between some of the more advanced countries and those countries which don't have those systems in place.
中国内地，我们承担了22个就世界气象局的中心，通过这些中心呢，来把我们的技术辐射出去，并且通过这个中心呢，来帮助其他发展中国家来加强能力方面的建设。我们中国政府每年提供奖学金，就请他们来参加留学。我们还承担了世界气象组织的2个区域培训中心，来帮助发展中国家来提升它的人力资源这个能力。
One can look up to see a piece of the blue sky. But together, we can see the skies of the Earth.
WMO, we are really grateful and honored to be winners of the LUI Prize 2018, and we are planning to use the resources to enhance the global disaster risk reduction capacity, and especially support our developing country members in improving their service capability.
Over the past 2 decades, changing climate has intensified natural disasters all over the world, because hazards in one place are causally linked to weather conditions in the others.
We are the United Nations Specialized Agency for weather, climate and water, and we are dealing with the national meteorological and hydrological services, which are responsibility for early warnings of short-term weather events or climate issues and water resource management in the member countries.
Since the 1950s, WMO has pulled together its members from 191 states and territories to address the common challenges brought on by natural hazards.
No one country in meteorology can do this alone. It was recognized more than a century ago, and since then, the World Meteorological Organization provides essential leadership in cooperation globally, so every country would have contribution and also access to the global information and global services. We are operating the global public good system where many nations take responsibility to help others in exchanging prediction and sharing knowledge.
The critical importance of WMO is that to serve as a framework of collaboration which allow members under the same standard and the same format, which enable people can understand each other. The key factor WMO members contribute to the disaster risk reduction is the improvement of weather forecasting accuracy. Now we can reach the same accuracy at 7 days with a 90% of confidence and in the weather pattern. That's the science. The real advancement, all the governments, all the partners can rely on this information to take actions.
In 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, requested by the government of Vietnam, WMO organized an emergency response team comprises of the Weather Service of China, Hong Kong, China, and also the regional center in Japan. And the evacuation of some 600,000 people was very effective in mitigating the hazard arising from Typhoon Haiyan.
WMO provides regional and global support to all its members, each at different stages of socio-economic development.
So in more developed countries, systems are in place, early alerts are in place, there's good response systems, but in many developing countries and small island states, these systems are not in place. So the poverty and the lack of governance structures actually exacerbates the impact of disasters quite disproportionately.
It's an encouraging fact that if we look at trends currently, less people die from disasters than they did 10 years ago. However, that trend is not homogeneous across all countries. And there are a number of countries, and particularly low-income countries and small island developing states, where that trend is reversed. That means that the number of people losing their lives to disasters is actually trending up. And that is very much the rationale behind this new initiative that WMO and a number of partners have launched called Cruise, where we're trying to help bridge the gap between some of the more advanced countries and those countries which don't have those systems in place.
中国内地，我们承担了22个就世界气象局的中心，通过这些中心呢，来把我们的技术辐射出去，并且通过这个中心呢，来帮助其他发展中国家来加强能力方面的建设。我们中国政府每年提供奖学金，就请他们来参加留学。我们还承担了世界气象组织的2个区域培训中心，来帮助发展中国家来提升它的人力资源这个能力。
One can look up to see a piece of the blue sky. But together, we can see the skies of the Earth.
WMO, we are really grateful and honored to be winners of the LUI Prize 2018, and we are planning to use the resources to enhance the global disaster risk reduction capacity, especially support our developing country members in improving their service capability.
Over the past 2 decades, changing climate has intensified natural disasters all over the world, because hazards in one place are causally linked to weather conditions in the others.
We are the United Nations Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate and Water, and we are dealing with the national meteorological and hydrological services, which are responsibility for early warnings of short-term weather events, or climate issues and water resource management in the member countries.
Since the 1950s, WMO has pulled together its members from 191 states and territories to address the common challenges brought on by natural hazards.
No one country in meteorology can do this alone. It was recognized more than a century ago, and since then, the World Meteorological Organization provides essential leadership in cooperation globally, so every country would have contribution and also access to the global information and global services. We are operating the global public good system where many nations take responsibility to help others in exchanging prediction and sharing knowledge.
The critical importance of WMO is that to serve as a framework of collaboration which allow members under the same standard and the same format, which enable people can understand each other. The key factor WMO members contribute to the disaster risk reduction is the improvement of weather forecasting accuracy. Now we can reach the same accuracy at 7 days with a 90% of confidence and in the weather pattern. That's the science. The real advancement. All the governments, all the partners can rely on this information to take actions.
In 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, requested by the government of Vietnam, WMO organized an emergency response team comprises of the Weather Service of China, Hong Kong, China, and also the regional center in Japan. And the evacuation of some 600,000 people was very effective in mitigating the hazard arising from Typhoon Haiyan.
WMO provides regional and global support to all its members, each at different stages of socio-economic development.
So in more developed countries, systems are in place, early alerts are in place, there's good response systems, but in many developing countries and small island states, these systems are not in place. So the poverty and the lack of governance structures actually exacerbates the impact of disasters quite disproportionately.
It's an encouraging fact that if we look at trends currently, less people die from disasters than they did 10 years ago. However, that trend is not homogeneous across all countries. And there are a number of countries, in particular low-income countries and small island developing states, where that trend is reversed. That means that the number of people losing their lives to disasters is actually trending up. And that is very much the rationale behind this new initiative that WMO and a number of partners have launched called Enquiries, where we're trying to help bridge the gap between some of the more advanced countries and those countries which don't have those systems in place.
中国内地，我们承担了22个就世界气象局的中心，通过这些中心呢，来把我们的技术辐射出去，并且通过这个中心呢，来帮助其他发展中国家来加强能力方面的建设。我们中国政府每年提供奖学金，就请他们来参加留学。我们还承担了世界气象组织的2个区域培训中心，来帮助发展中国家来提升它的人力资源这个能力。
One can look up to see a piece of the blue sky. But together, we can see the skies of the Earth.
WMO, we are really grateful and honored to be winners of the LUI Prize 2018, and we are planning to use the resources to enhance the global disaster risk reduction capacity, and especially support our developing country members in improving their service capability.
Over the past 2 decades, changing climate has intensified natural disasters all over the world, because hazards in one place are causally linked to weather conditions in the others.
We are the United Nations Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate and Water, and we are dealing with the national meteorological and hydrological services, which are responsibility for early warnings of short-term weather events or climate issues and water resource management in the member countries.
Since the 1950s, WMO has pulled together its members from 191 states and territories to address the common challenges brought on by natural hazards.
No one country in meteorology can do this alone. It was recognized more than a century ago, and since then, the World Meteorological Organization provides essential leadership in cooperation globally, so every country would have contribution and also access to the global information and global services. We are operating the global public good system where many nations take responsibility to help others in exchanging prediction and sharing knowledge.
The critical importance of WMO is that to serve as a framework of collaboration which allow members under the same standard and the same format, which enable people can understand each other. The key factor WMO members contribute to the disaster risk reduction is the improvement of weather forecasting accuracy. Now we can reach the same accuracy at 7 days with a 90% of confidence and in the weather pattern. They say that's the science. The real advancement, all the governments, all the partners can rely on this information to take actions.
In 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, requested by the government of Vietnam, WMO organized an emergency response team comprises of the Weather Service of China, Hong Kong, China, and also the regional center in Japan. And the evacuation of some 600,000 people was very effective in mitigating the hazard arising from Typhoon Haiyan.
WMO provides regional and global support to all its members, each at different stages of socio-economic development.
So in more developed countries, systems are in place, early alerts are in place, there's good response systems, but in many developing countries and small island states, these systems are not in place. So the poverty and the lack of governance structures actually exacerbates the impact of disasters quite disproportionately.
It's an encouraging fact that if we look at trends currently, less people die from disasters than they did 10 years ago. However, that trend is not homogeneous across all countries. And there are a number of countries, and particularly low-income countries and small island developing states, where that trend is reversed. That means that the number of people losing their lives to disasters is actually trending up. And that is very much the rationale behind this new initiative that WMO and a number of partners have launched called Cruise, where we're trying to help bridge the gap between some of the more advanced countries and those countries which don't have those systems in place.
中国内地，我们承担了22个就世界气象局的中心，通过这些中心呢，来把我们的技术辐射出去，并且通过这个中心呢，来帮助其他发展中国家来加强能力方面的建设。我们中国政府每年提供奖学金，就请他们来参加留学。我们还承担了世界气象组织的2个区域培训中心，来帮助发展中国家来提升它的人力资源这个能力。
One can look up to see a piece of the blue sky. But together, we can see the skies of the Earth.
WMO, we are really grateful and honored to be winners of the LUI Prize 2018, and we are planning to use the resources to enhance the global disaster risk reduction capacity, and especially support our developing country members in improving their service capability.
Over the past 2 decades, changing climate has intensified natural disasters all over the world, because hazards in one place are causally linked to weather conditions in the others.
We are the United Nations Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate and Water, and we are dealing with the national meteorological and hydrological services, which are responsibility for early warnings of short-term weather events, or climate issues and water resource management in the member countries.
Since the 1950s, WMO has pulled together its members from 191 states and territories to address the common challenges brought on by natural hazards.
No one country in meteorology can do this alone. It was recognized more than a century ago, and since then, the World Meteorological Organization provides essential leadership in cooperation globally. So every country would have contribution and also access to the global information and global services. We are operating the global public good system where many nations take responsibility to help others in exchanging prediction and sharing knowledge.
The critical importance of WMO is that to serve as a framework of collaboration which allow members under the same standard and the same format, which enable people can understand each other. The key factor WMO members contribute to the disaster risk reduction is the improvement of weather forecasting accuracy. Now we can reach the same accuracy at 7 days with a 90% of confidence and in the weather pattern. They say that's the science. The real advancement, all the governments, all the partners can rely on this information to take actions.
In 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan struck Philippines, requested by the government of Vietnam, WMO organized an emergency response team comprises of the Weather Service of China, Hong Kong, China, and also the regional center in Japan. And the evacuation of some 600,000 people was very effective in mitigating the hazard arising from Typhoon Haiyan.
WMO provides regional and global support to all its members, each at different stages of socio-economic development.
So in more developed countries, systems are in place, early alerts are in place, there's good response systems, but in many developing countries and small island states, these systems are not in place. So the poverty and the lack of governance structures actually exacerbates the impact of disasters quite disproportionately.
It's an encouraging fact that if we look at trends currently, less people die from disasters than they did 10 years ago. However, that trend is not homogeneous across all countries. And there are a number of countries, in particularly low-income countries and small island developing states, where that trend is reversed. That means that the number of people losing their lives to disasters is actually trending up. And that is very much the rationale behind this new initiative that WMO and a number of partners have launched called Enquiries, where we're trying to help bridge the gap between some of the more advanced countries and those countries which don't have those systems in place.
中国内地，我们承担了22个就世界气象局的中心，通过这些中心呢，来把我们的技术辐射出去，并且通过这个中心呢，来帮助其他发展中国家来加强能力方面的建设。我们中国政府每年提供奖学金，就请他们来参加留学。我们还承担了世界气象组织的2个区域培训中心，来帮助发展中国家来提升它的人力资源这个能力。
One can look up to see a piece of the blue sky. But together, we can see the skies of the Earth.
WMO, we are really grateful and honored to be winners of the LUI Prize 2018, and we are planning to use the resources to enhance the global disaster risk reduction capacity, and especially support our developing country members in improving their service capability.
Over the past 2 decades, changing climate has intensified natural disasters all over the world, because hazards in one place are causally linked to weather conditions in the others.
We are the United Nations Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate and Water, and we are dealing with the national meteorological and hydrological services, which are responsibility for early warnings of short-term weather events or climate issues and water resource management in the member countries.
Since the 1950s, WMO has pulled together its members from 191 states and territories to address the common challenges brought on by natural hazards.
No one country in meteorology can do this alone. It was recognized more than a century ago, and since then, the World Meteorological Organization provides essential leadership in cooperation globally, so every country would have contribution and also access to the global information and global services. We are operating the global public good system where many nations take responsibility to help others in exchanging prediction and sharing knowledge.
The critical importance of WMO is that to serve as a framework of collaboration which allow members under the same standard and the same format, which enable people can understand each other. The key factor WMO members contribute to the disaster risk reduction is the improvement of weather forecasting accuracy. Now we can reach the same accuracy at 7 days with a 90% of confidence and in the weather pattern. That's the science. The real advancement. All the governments, all the partners can rely on this information to take actions.
In 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, requested by the government of Vietnam, WMO organized an emergency response team comprises of the Weather Service of China, Hong Kong, China, and also the regional center in Japan. And the evacuation of some 600,000 people was very effective in mitigating the hazard arising from Typhoon Haiyan.
WMO provides regional and global support to all its members, each at different stages of socio-economic development.
So in more developed countries, systems are in place, early alerts are in place, there's good response systems, but in many developing countries and small island states, these systems are not in place. So the poverty and the lack of governance structures actually exacerbates the impact of disasters quite disproportionately.
It's an encouraging fact that if we look at trends currently, less people die from disasters than they did 10 years ago. However, that trend is not homogeneous across all countries. And there are a number of countries, and particularly low-income countries and small island developing states, where that trend is reversed. That means that the number of people losing their lives to disasters is actually trending up. And that is very much the rationale behind this new initiative that WMO and a number of partners have launched called Cruise, where we're trying to help bridge the gap between some of the more advanced countries and those countries which don't have those systems in place.
中国内地，我们承担了22个就世界气象局的中心，通过这些中心呢，来把我们的技术辐射出去，并且通过这个中心呢，来帮助其他发展中国家来加强能力方面的建设。我们中国政府每年提供奖学金，就请他们来参加留学。我们还承担了世界气象组织的2个区域培训中心，来帮助发展中国家来提升它的人力资源这个能力。
One can look up to see a piece of the blue sky. But together, we can see the skies of the Earth.
WMO, we are really grateful and honored to be winners of the LUI Prize 2018, and we are planning to use the resources to enhance the global disaster risk reduction capacity, and especially support our developing country members in improving their service capability.
Over the past 2 decades, changing climate has intensified natural disasters all over the world, because hazards in one place are causally linked to weather conditions in the others.
We are the United Nations Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate and Water, and we are dealing with the national meteorological and hydrological services, which are responsibility for early warnings of short-term weather events, or climate issues and water resource management in the member countries.
Since the 1950s,
will be Cantonese and channel 2 will be English. Please be seated. Our lecture is about to begin. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the LUI World Prize, Prize for World Civilization Laureate Public Lecture 2018. My name is Leah Chen. I'm the master student of PolyU with a major in applied math for science and technology, MC of today's lecture. We are honored to have Professor Taalas, Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, to be the speaker of today's event. The World Meteorological Organization is the Welfare Betterment Prize laureate for the LUI World Prize 2018. Let's have a round of applause for Professor Petteri Taalas. We are also pleased to have guests of the LUI World Prize Limited to be with us today. Welcome. To begin, may I first invite the President of Hong Kong Polytechnic University, Professor Timothy Tong, to deliver welcoming remarks. Professor Tong, please.
Good morning. Last night, I had the pleasure to attend the LUI World Prize presentation. And I must say that even after the event, I felt so upbeat and excited because I saw the prize presentations to 3 really outstanding individuals or organizations. And today, we are very happy that a distinguished person from one of the organizations that received the LUI World Prize will be sharing with us his insight about a topic that he personally is so concerned about. So let me also thank everyone associated with the LUI World Prize for having this partnership with Hong Kong Polytechnic University. I think since the establishment of the LUI World Prize, every year we have the opportunity to host a lecture by one of the laureates. And let me introduce the chairman of the prize recommendation committee to you, responsible for producing this prize winner who will be speaking to us today. And he's a good friend, Professor Lawrence Lau. Why don't we give a round of applause to Professor Lau. And I see a lot of good friends in the audience. They are actually also helping the Lui Chi Wo Prize Foundation. So welcome you all. And earlier you heard the introduction of Professor Petteri Taalas. I'd like to, just for my own pleasure, introduce him one more time. He's the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. Professor Petteri Taalas, would you please stand up so that we can see you? Yeah. Congratulations. Congratulations. The World Meteorological Organization oftentimes is referred to the WMO in short. WMO is the winner of the Welfare Betterment Prize of the Lui Chi Wo Prize this year. And in a moment, Professor Taalas will deliver the lecture entitled Towards a Weather and Climate Resilient World. I think this lecture cannot be more timely. For those of you who are local, or at least as of 3 weeks ago, you're local, you remember the typhoon that blew through Hong Kong. I think all in all, we survived extremely well. And thanks to the good work of the local government, and of course their good work could not have been so outstanding without actually using the technology and the information that is provided by the WMO. So I know we have the observatory director right here. Look, let's give him a round of applause too. Welcome. Thank you. Congratulations on your good work. Yeah. And before we walked in, he actually gave me a challenge. May I share your challenge with them? He said he wanted to play guitar with me. That's a date between us, okay? Okay, back to a serious business. As we all know, nowadays it seems like every year the severe climate events that we come across are getting more and more severe. Years ago, I remember hearing that we may have this once every 100-year flood. It seems like this once 100-year flood is happening every year. Okay? And the storms are getting more and more intense. So how are we going to improve our ability to prepare for these severe climate events? I think WMO has an excellent way to help us to face this kind of challenge. And I think the key is through international cooperation. WMO facilitates free exchange of meteorological information among its members. And they have 191 member states and territories. And what the members do is that they share information for the purpose of disaster risk reduction, public safety, and environmental protection. They enhance the monitoring, forecasting, and communication of meteorological hazards on a global scale. And their work has been proven effective. Over the past 50 years, WMO has played an important role in reducing global loss of life from extreme weather, climate, and water-related events tenfold. That's really impressive. So today, we're very honored to have Professor Taalas to share with us WMO's persistent efforts in developing a framework for international cooperation to tackle severe climates. But before I turn the floor to Professor Taalas, I must also introduce a few more individuals to you. Mr. Alex Lui, he's from the Lui's family. Yeah, welcome. And Bettina, his lovely wife. Bettina. And also Francis, better half. Mrs. Lui. Okay. Francis has not arrived yet, right? Okay. All right. So without further ado, let me turn the podium to Professor Taalas. Professor Taalas, please.
So good morning, everybody, and it's a great pleasure to be in Hong Kong. And I was here last time 3 years ago, and I learned to know the excellent work that the Hong Kong Observatory is doing here, and I learned to know that you have a very well developed country, and everything here works like a Swiss clock. In June last summer, I got a call from Hong Kong, and Professor Lawrence was calling me, and he was asking whether I would be ready to receive the Luigi Wu Prize of this year, and it was a great surprise to me, and a very pleasant surprise, and it was this time I had a very pleasant reason to come to Hong Kong. And I will tell you now what we know about climate change. For me personally, being at the technical university, it's very interesting. My older son graduated from Helsinki Technological University a year ago from biomedical technology, and my younger son just started his studies at the same university, studying process technology, so I have also that kind of blood in my family. And before coming to WMO, I used to be chairman of the board of University of Eastern Finland, which is the third biggest university of Finland, so also this kind of academic world is very common to me. And for the first 15 years of my career, I was a scientist and became a professor, and thereafter I became a bureaucrat, running the Met Service of Finland, which is a half research institute, and for the past 3 years I have been working for World Meteorological Organization, which is science and technology-based organization of the United Nations family. So I'm going to tell you about disasters, climate change, and also I'm touching what you are doing here in Hong Kong, and you are also very much contributing to these issues that I'm going to show you in this presentation. So we are the United Nations specialized agency on weather, climate, and water, and almost all of the United Nations members, they are also members of WMO. We have only two countries missing from our portfolio, and we are very much coordinating the work of 200,000 experts at the national level, and the experts of Hong Kong Observatory, they are also very much contributing to the work of WMO. We established the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in the late 70s, and the first report was published in '88, and IPCC is just finalizing its most recent report on 1.5-degree warming in South Korea this week. I was supposed to be there, but I had the pleasure to be receiving the Luigi Wu Prize here instead of going to IPCC meeting. That will be published next Monday. I will have a press conference in Geneva on that. We have also been dealing with the UNFCCC, which is running the climate negotiation process, and we will have the next negotiation in Poland in December this year. And we are also very much attached to the Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction and also Paris Agreement. And one of the things that we have been dealing with is the global weather observing system, and that's also very much technology-based, and we have been setting standards for the observations. So you have to measure the same temperature, same pressure, and so forth in the same way worldwide, and we have been setting standards for those observations. We are the second oldest United Nations organization. International Telecommunication Union was established 5 years before us, and this was the founding meeting in Vienna, and there was not a single woman present there, so the gender balance here is slightly better than the case there. And these are the issues that we are dealing with, and I will show you some results of related to those. Climate is one of our backbones, disasters and public safety. We are also dealing with the water resource management, which is very much linked to climate challenges. Data and technology, that's what we are dealing with. We are perhaps the fathers of big data. We have been always stacking any supercomputer that one can build. And then we have most of our members that would benefit from strengthening of their national capacity, and Hong Kong Observatory has been very much contributing to development of those capacities in other fields as well. And this is our headquarters. It's also, this building where we are today is designed by a famous architect, but also we are lucky to have that kind of building in Geneva. I'd be happy to see you visiting us one day in Geneva. So we have various observations, which is the backbone of climate science, and it's also a backbone of operational meteorology. We have ground-based stations, and the network is fairly dense in Europe, North America, and most parts of Asia, but we have very limited coverage in Africa, the Pacific Islands, and also southern part of America. Then we are dealing with balloon soundings. We are also measuring the vertical profiles of weather. Then we are coordinating satellite measurements, and together with IOC we are running ocean observations, and we are also dealing with air quality and greenhouse gas monitoring network. And so far the greenhouse gas monitoring network is too sparse to fully understand the carbon cycle. Satellite observations, they are very important today. They have been one of the factors why we have been able to improve the quality of the forecasts, and we are coordinating the global satellite constellation. We have North American, European, Chinese, Russian, Indian satellites, and how to optimize the use of various national and or regional programs. That's very much the duty of us. And the satellite technology has been getting fancier and fancier, and we can do much better job today as compared to the situation during the past decades. And for example, Chinese satellites are nowadays at very high level, which wasn't the case 20 years ago, and we have one of the fathers of Chinese satellite programs, my Assistant Secretary General Wen Jianzhang, also present here today. Okay, so, sorry, we lost this one. So, and we have also we have been setting standards for various observations, and your Hong Kong Observatory has been contributing to the cloud observation systems, and we just published a new cloud atlas last year, and there was a great job done by Hong Kong Observatory behind that. So perhaps you have seen that we have been able to improve the forecast skills. For example, this recent typhoon Mangut was seen only 2 weeks ahead, and your country had 1 week time to prepare for the event, and it was very well forecasted, and there were no casualties here in Hong Kong. So we have been able to enhance the quality of the forecasts, and in the past we used to have a gap between the northern hemispheric forecast skills and the southern hemispheric forecast skills. There was this kind of gap. For example, in Northern Hemisphere, the accuracy was more than 85%, and in Southern Hemisphere, just above 70%. And this has practically disappeared, and that's very much because of satellite observations. And also, if you look at this trend here, you can see that the accuracies are getting much better, and something that we were able to forecast 3 days ahead in the past, we can now forecast 7 days ahead. That's observing systems, scientific improvement, and also bigger supercomputing resources that we have available today. And this is not going to be the end of the story. We have a couple of United Nations agreements dealing with the substance of WMO. We have Sendai framework, which is very much promoting capacity development on disaster risk reduction, and that's one of the backbones of our work. About 90% of the disasters that we observe worldwide, they are related to weather. So that's why the national weather services like Hong Kong Observatory, they are key players in reaching the targets of Sendai Agreement. We have another holy book, somebody may say it's Quran or Bible or whatever you prefer. That's Sustainable Development Goals, and there are 17 of the goals, and majority of those goals are somehow related to disasters, climate change, or water resource management, and that's why the weight and need for WMO activities has been dramatically growing. And that's also seen in the UN family. Here we are meeting with 30 UN heads of agencies, meeting on annual basis, or actually twice a year, and many of our sister organizations, they have been eager to enhance cooperation with us, and during my term we have been signing new agreements with several of them. Agriculture is one of the sectors. Health, you have Margaret Chan, who used to run World Health Organization from your country. We have also the transport sector is very much interested in cooperation with us. ICAO, which is run by a Chinese colleague. IMO is run by a South Korean colleague, and then we have also other agencies that are dealing with us. And we are also inside the UN family. We are the expert organization on climate matters, and I'm personally very much advising Secretary General Guterres on climate matters. Here we are, for example, attending the One Belt event in Beijing, which was carried out a couple of years ago, and we are also very much contributing to the United Nations climate negotiations. Here I'm speaking as an opening speaker at the last COP meeting, and then we are also contributing to the United Nations General Assemblies, which was held last week in New York. There I had a chance to be present as well. So then we have, besides the observing systems, we are also supporting global data and forecasting centers, and WMO works like a family. We are very freely exchanging data, but we are also very freely exchanging know-how between various centers, and the global centers are providing these long-term forecasts with global models, and they are useful also for Hong Kong. Without those, you wouldn't have been able to forecast the Mangut 2 weeks ahead, and we are strengthening those centers in our everyday function. We have also climate centers and climate outlook fora, and this part of world is hosted by Hong Kong Observatory, and we were just signing new agreement with Hong Kong 2 days ago, which is contributing to this climate service activities as well. And one of the challenges that we are dealing with is air quality, and here is one pollutant, NO2, which is very much coming from traffic and energy sector. And if you look at the map, you can see some colored areas, especially with the black color, and unfortunately you are in an area which is one of the most polluted in the whole world. So there's an equality challenge, and that's also health challenge. I was looking at the equality statistics for yesterday, and Hong Kong wasn't a very pleasant place because of high level of pollution. And that's one of the challenges, how to improve that, and by mitigating this problem, one can often mitigate also climate problem. So it's a little bit different emissions, but still that's a challenge. And government of China has an ambitious program to solve this problem. These problems are also fairly new in India, where they have very polluted cities like New Delhi, and classically Europe used to be very polluted, but the situation has been improving quite a bit. And there has been also an improvement in the USA, which also used to be fairly polluted, especially the east coast of USA. We are also dealing with health services, and we have different scales here. We have this equality challenge, which is health issue, and then we have also so-called vector-borne diseases, the outbreak of malaria, cholera, dengue fever, and that kind of diseases. They depend on the weather conditions before the outbreak, and by issuing seasonal predictions, one can also forecast what's going to happen in the health sector, and by having such services, one could better prepare to mitigate the health problems. And you have been able to create, for example, the Hong Kong heat index here, which is highly useful index worldwide. And here you can see my colleague from Hong Kong Observatory, CM Shun, who has been doing excellent work here, and he's a very well-known character also worldwide because of those achievements. And there has been a study what is the economic benefit of our work and the work of our national services, and we have very positive numbers to show that there are several hundreds of lives saved every year, like what happened here during the Typhoon Mangkhut, and we have been able to avoid several billions euros of disaster losses, and we have produced tens of billions of euros additional benefits every year because of the services. So investments in our sector, they are also economically viable. World Bank has shown that once you invest in national services, you gain the money back at least twofold, or sometimes even 14-fold. So what I'm recommending to governments is to invest more in such services, and we had a very good meeting yesterday morning with your chief executive, and she also very well understood that it's worthwhile to invest, and the savings that you were having during the last typhoon event, they were just one demonstration that what you gain once you have fancy early warning services. And the things that I'm talking about, those are also very well understood by the economy sector. We are having an annual basis World Economic Forum in Davos, and during the past 2 years they have been estimating what are the biggest risks for the global economy on annual basis, and in 2017 and also this year they estimated that extreme weather events, natural disasters, and failure of climate change mitigation adaptation, they are the biggest risk. And the high impact issue would be nuclear war. That's very much related to the development in North Korea, but the likelihood of that event is not very high. But of course, the impact would be fairly high. So economy sector very well understands what is the value of our business. Then I'd be happy to show you some statistics concerning disasters. This is a map showing, a graph showing what has happened to the disasters, big disasters worldwide. This Typhoon Mangkhut or severe events worldwide, they are the ones that we have on this slide. And if you look at this blue, it's hydrological events. It's very much flooding problem, and the green one is storms, and then we have heat waves, which is the orange color here. And the majority of the disasters, they are related to storms and flooding. And this part of the world is the most sensitive area, and that's the area where we have largest amount of those disasters. And it's a little bit misleading to talk about global warming. It's the heat waves are one of the issue here, but the majority of the issues and the increase is mostly seen in the amount of flooding and storms. So therefore, the warming is not perhaps the most interesting thing globally. And if you look at the casualties that we have seen related to disasters since the 50s, which is the graph here, in the 50s and 60s we used to have plenty of casualties, and we have been seeing very positive development here. We have been able to avoid casualties, and that's because of improved early warning services. But what is most striking is that the economic losses have been growing very rapidly, and we cannot fully mitigate those. We can adapt to those things and minimize certain risks, but this evolution is not very positive. So we have seen a threefold increase in the economic losses related to disasters during the past 30 years. And last year, as a single year, was the most expensive year. We had losses of the order of $330 billion US dollars. Here are some statistics showing what kind of casualties we have seen related to tropical cyclones, which are during the past 25 years, during past more than 100 years, and these are always for 1,000 people, so this is 300,000 people. And so far the worst case has been the tropical storm that was hitting Bangladesh, and also the second one is Bangladesh. It's typically the poorest countries who are suffering the most, and their infrastructures and adaptation capacity is lowest. And many of these events have been observed in Asian part of the world. And economic losses, they are highest in developed world, and so far the most expensive single event has been the Hurricane Katrina, which was destroying half of New Orleans, and there were also more than 1,000 casualties there. And also we can see that the Asian numbers are here, but the US costs have been highest so far. And as I said, last year was the most expensive year so far. And we can prevent the loss of lives, as I was saying, and these early warning services, they are very much the factor behind that, and that's perhaps the reason why we were able to become the laureates of LUI Prize this year. So that's and this is work coordinated by WMO, but it's very much run at the national level, and this national level work is where we have this touch to the general public. Then I will show you a couple of cases. There was super typhoon Haiyan 5 years ago, and where we played a role. And again, the losses were the largest in less developed countries, and it was hitting both Philippines and Vietnam's, where the infrastructures were not as persistent as is the case here in Hong Kong. And we had the most severe typhoon hitting Japan during the past 25 years, Jebi, and there were casualties, and there were also major economic losses. And typically, it's not only the wind speed that is causing problems, but it's the storm surges in the coastal areas, and also large amounts of rainfall. And this was the case that you were familiar with, and it has been the most intense tropical storm, super typhoon of this year, and there's the next one which is going to hit Japan and South Korea during the coming weekend, and it's also category 5 tropical storm. And here there was lots of damage to the forest. I had a chance to have a helicopter flight around Hong Kong yesterday, and we saw lots of forest damage caused by that. And there was some damage to the infrastructures, but no casualties. That's great. And why you were so successful? First, you got the early warnings, and you have very powerful way to transfer that information to the general public. It's lots of mobile phone-based services, Facebook services, and also web-page services, and the machinery here in Hong Kong functions very well. So that's that kind of know-how we should transfer to the remaining 100 of our members that don't have such services. And you have also technological means to contribute to the forecasting of tropical storms. You have aircraft, and you can drop a measuring device called drop zone into the eye of a tropical storm, and that gives you more information on the strength and how it's going to behave. And we have agreed that we will promote the use of Hong Kong aircraft for such purposes in the future. And if one could fly in the airspace of Philippines and Taiwan, there would be better forecasts also for Hong Kong and China area. And what's happening now is that we have started seeing, as the president said, that something that used to happen every 100 years in the past seemed to happen not every year today, but more often, and that's what's happening because of climate change. We sometimes observe certain things every 30 years. We can nowadays observe them every 5 years, and in the future perhaps every second year. And some of these phenomena have existed already in the past, but the frequency is changing. That's happening to the storms, it's happening to the heat waves, and it's also happening to the flooding events. And we have had plenty of extreme weather worldwide. Perhaps I don't go to the details, but it's not only this part of the world where we have seen unusual things happening. And we have also seen heat waves and unusual events in Asia and also Africa and Europe. And Japan as a country has been suffering quite a bit this year. The Japanese ambassador in Geneva is saying that Japan is a department store of disasters. They have everything. They have earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, storms, flooding, so forth, and heat waves as well. And then how well the countries are ready to face these challenges. This map with the red colors is showing where we have the most vulnerable areas, and the green colors indicate countries which are better prepared to face the problems. And Africa as a continent is most colorful, so most African countries are very vulnerable to disasters, and that's also the case in southern part of Asia. So you can see here, for example, Vietnam is exposed to many disasters, but they have been investing in early warning services, and they have dramatically improved their performance. But some of the low-lying countries, India, Bangladesh, they are very vulnerable, and you can see here nearby also countries that need assistance. And we at the moment we have a so-called warning system which is covering the European countries, and we have agreed that we will improve such a system to have worldwide coverage, and Hong Kong Observatory is contributing to this enterprise, and we will use a fraction of the LUI prize funding to improve the global system. And the idea is that we would have global coverage of such an early warning service, and the first step is to have some Asian parts included in the system, and gradually to have global coverage. And inside the United Nations system, we have plenty of humanitarian organizations that would benefit from early warning services, and we have started on a test base to provide services for various players like World Health Organization, FAO, World Food Programme, and so forth, and we will establish a permanent service next year, and this global alarm system is going to be backbone of that, and we will also invest some of the LUI prize funding for such a purpose. Okay, and then the last part of my presentation is going to deal with climate change. So what we have observed in climate change so far, this is the global temperature graph since 1850s, and you can see that there's been something happening here, and we have exceeded 1.1 degree warming so far. And there's variability from year to year, and so far the warmest year was 2016. It was because of climate change, but there was a strong El Niño event which was boosting the warming. And this year has been so-called La Niña year, when the temperatures in the ocean areas have been lower, and that's why we haven't been breaking the records. But next year we expect to see at least a weak El Niño, so we may again break temperature records. And the backbone of those observations are long-term measurements, and we are happy to have one of the so-called Centennial stations, Hong Kong, and your observations are also important for such an enterprise. Here you have to correct the heat island. There's much more concrete and paved environment as compared to the situation 100 years ago, and we have to correct that in the data when we make these calculations. But to detect 1 degree warming from such a data, that's quite a challenge, and because of the standardized observations, we can detect such a fairly small signal actually. And we have stored 90% of the extra heat that we have produced to the planet to the oceans, and the oceans have been warming by ½ degree so far, and because of the warmed oceans, we get more power to the tropical storms, and that's contributing to the strength of the tropical storms, and it's also contributing to the area where we can observe tropical storms. So here is an estimation of how the tropical storm situation is today, in which areas, and how many category 5, 4, 3, and so forth storms we can observe, and this is the estimation of what would happen if we would reach the Paris 2 degree target. So it would already mean that we would have wider area of tropical storms, and we would observe more often category 4 and 5 tropical cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones. So this is already happening. We have been also seeing a change in the sea level rise. We have sea level rise of 26 centimeters so far, and we have measurements since 1870s, first based on tide gauges, and more recently based on satellite measurements, which are very accurate in millimeter scale. And what has happened recently is that there has been a trend upward. We are now having more than 3 millimeters per year sea level rise, whereas it used to be 2 millimeters per year in the past. And what are the factors behind this sea level rise? If you look at the last decade statistics, it's thermal expansion. When we heat the seawater, it's expanding, and then the glaciers are melting, And especially there has been a boost in the melting of the Greenland glacier, where we have about 2 kilometers thick glacier. And if you compare the Greenland contribution in the past and today, it's almost increased threefold. So far, the Antarctic glacier hasn't been melting too much, which is good news, where we have a potential of 50 meters sea level rise, and this Greenland glacier has a potential of 7 to 8 meters sea level rise globally. And how sensitive the world is to sea level rise and storm surges, and where are the hotspots from that perspective. You can see a red area here, which is very much your part of the world. So here we have plenty of low-lying coastal cities and lots of population. So this part of the world is most sensitive to the sea level rise and storm surges in the coastal areas. We have some others, Istanbul, London, in the European part of the world, and a couple of US cities and some African and Latin American cities. But this is clearly the most vulnerable area worldwide. We have also seen changes in the water content of lower atmosphere. We have more evaporation and we have more water vapor in the lower atmosphere, which is contributing to the flooding problem. And we have also already seen changes in the global precipitation patterns. This indicates the brownish colors here indicate the decrease of the global of the precipitation. We have two periods here. We have recent 3 decades and early part of last century compared here, and you can see that Africa is getting much drier, and it's also drought is more prevailing here, and at the high northern latitudes and some areas in southern hemisphere we have seen an increase in the amount of rainfall. We are publishing an annual State of Climate report where also other UN agencies are contributing, and this is an estimation of IMF, International Monetary Fund, what has been the economic impact of climate change so far on global economy. And you can see that the high northern latitudes, they have been benefiting. It's getting warmer and also wetter, which is positive for the agriculture and forestry sector. But if you look at the global map, you can see lots of red color, which indicates a negative impact on global GDP. And southern hemisphere and the low latitudes have already suffered because of the change. What's happening in the atmosphere and the concentrations of carbon dioxide? Here we have 2 sites. We have Mauna Loa, where they have measurements since the 50s, and one which I used to run in my past. And you can see the same trend in the Arctic and in the tropical zone, and there's a fairly dramatic increase, and so far no phase out of this increase. The amplitude is different. In tropics you don't have so much energy consumption, which is the case in winter time. In the Arctic and in summertime, the vegetation is serving as a sink of carbon. And we have 800,000 years of ice core drilling from Greenland and Antarctica, and we can estimate how has been the concentration of the 3 most important greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And in all of the cases, the concentrations are today the highest in 800,000 years. And we can go back by using some sort of indirect methods. First is ice cores, that's 800,000 years back, and by using alkenones, boron isotopes, and leaf stomata, we can go back in history by 50 million years, and there has been natural variability in the past, but this is the 800,000 years. Here we have some estimations. What was the level last year? 400 ppm, And about 3 million years ago, we had a similar case. I will come back to how the estimation of sea level and the temperature were at that time. And then we have tens of millions of years, there have been cases where there was less vegetation on the planet, and the carbon dioxide concentration was estimated to be even higher than today. And if we want to understand the carbon behavior, we have to know this carbon cycle. About 80%, about 90% of the increase is related to the use of fossil energy, and about 10% is related to especially deforestation in places like Indonesia and Brazil. And about half of the extra carbon dioxide remains in the atmosphere. About 1/3 is taken by growing vegetation, and about 1/4 is taken by the oceans. And since oceans serve as a sink for carbon, we are also changing the chemical composition of the seawater, and here you can see what has happened to the pH of seawater. We have seen a decrease worldwide, and there's an estimation that we have the lowest pH in 25 million years today. And at high latitudes, this sink is the strongest, and there we have seen the major changes. And this is going to be one of the long-term threats to the ocean ecosystems. We have seen changes in the sea ice coverage. This is from the Arctic, and so far the lowest amount of sea ice we have seen in 2012 when it comes to coverage. But for example, north of Greenland, we have for the first time seen open sea area which is not covered by ice. In southern hemisphere, the situation is a little bit better. We have seen a decline also there, but the differences to the normal is they are not so dramatic as is the case in the northern hemisphere. And perhaps the most dramatic changes have been seen in the amount of so-called multi-year ice. Typically, we used to have multi-year ice in the Arctic, which didn't melt during the summertime, and this is the case in '84, when we had lots of, for example, 4-year-old ice, 3-year, 2-year, and 1-year old ice. But today, those multi-year ice bars have practically disappeared. We have mostly 1-year-old ice, and coverage of the ice cover is much smaller than in '84. And these changes in the Arctic, they are changing also the weather patterns worldwide, and some of the unusual weather patterns that we have observed outside of the Arctic area, they are related to the changes in the radiation balance, and we have seen more often cold spells in Asia, Europe, and North America, and some of the heat waves that have been hitting those areas, they are also related to the changes in the Arctic. So what are the challenges for the mankind for the coming centuries? This is a scale from the past IPCC report, which was published 4 years ago. Here we have year 2000, and here we have 500 years ahead from us. If we use all of the fossil energy sources, we would reach 5 times the current carbon dioxide concentration, and that would mean 8 degrees warmer planet, which would persist for thousands of years. And if we would like to reach the lower limit of Paris Agreement, we should stop using fossil energy fairly soon, and then we could stabilize the concentration of carbon dioxide under 500 ppm level. The 2-degree target would mean something like 600 ppm of carbon dioxide, a little bit higher than today, and then we would have the 2-degree stabilization. And in all of the cases, we expect to see the sea level rise to continue, and it's the pace is of the order of 1 meter per century in case of that we are not stopping the emissions, and it would continue for thousands of years until we would have been melting both Antarctic and Greenland ice, which would mean something like 50 meters higher sea level than today. And even in the case of a 2-degree target, we could reach something like half meter to 1 meter higher levels by the end of next century. And then we are expecting to see changes also in the precipitation patterns and agricultural conditions, and perhaps I will go just to the agricultural conditions. This is what we would see in 3 degrees warmer planet, which is quite likely to happen if we are not very successful with the implementation of Paris Agreement. And the pledges of the countries so far, they would indicate this 3-degree warmer planet. And this is what might happen to the global agricultural production capacity of our planet. And you can see lots of red color, which indicates that we would lose large fraction of the current food production capacity of our planet. And at the same time, the population of the world is growing. We expect to see 4 billion inhabitants in Africa by the end of this century, besides current 1 billion. And this is, to me, the main concern related to climate change. How can we feed the growing population of our planet in such a case? And there are some green areas, but these are not the most favorable areas for agriculture. For example, the Tibetan area would benefit, but the agricultural conditions there are not very good. And that's the case also in Siberia or northern part of Europe or some parts of Canada. So that's my personal main concern. And where we are today with the emissions, here you can see the emission graph. Classically, USA and Europe have been the biggest emitter, and during the recent 15 years, China has become the biggest emitter, and there has been also fairly dramatic growth in the emissions of non-OECD countries. And China has been able to phase out this growth, and that's also the case in Europe and USA. But these players are the key players, but we shouldn't forget about this part either. I promised to say what was the case when we were exceeding 400 ppm last time. There's an estimation that was 3 million years ago, and then the temperatures were about 2 to 4 degrees warmer than today, and the sea level was 10 to 30 meters higher than today. And if you think of that number in Hong Kong, it's not very good news. So that's showing that already the current carbon dioxide concentration is a risky level. And the challenge that we are having is that if we go to higher concentrations of carbon dioxide, we are not returning back to the normal levels very soon. So if we would reach, for example, 3 times the current carbon dioxide concentration, it would take up to 100,000 years to return back to the normal levels. And that's why we have only this 30 years window to solve this problem. And the solution has to come from this graph. So how we are using energy today. So we are producing 85% of our energy today based on coal, oil and gas, and only 15% is based on nuclear, hydro and renewables. And we have 30 years time to revert this graph. So we should produce majority of our energy based on nuclear, hydro and renewables, and we should get rid of this growth that we have seen, especially in the oil and gas consumption. So with these words, I'm happy to answer your questions and have further discussions with you. Thank you.
For the inspiring lectures, please stay, Mrs. Taalas.
Yes.
While they're setting up for the Q&A session, may I have the honor to ask you some question? As we all know, we are in the new era of the artificial intelligence. I wonder if there are any applications of that in WMO?
Yeah, so first of all, we are, WMO as an organization and the meteorological community, we are some sort of fathers of big data. We have been always producing lots of data, so that means... Okay. So we have been always producing lots of data in our forecasting models and also in our observing systems. And we have been able to stock any supercomputer that has been invented. So we have always been dealing with big data, and that gives us opportunities for new applications. And both the public sector and private sector, they are at the moment very much dealing with those issues. And we have also private sector players like IBM or Google, which are dealing with those issues, and there are already plenty of new applications for various sectors developed, and we expect that trend to continue and even give a boost. And what is happening now is that there's a trend to go more towards impact-based forecasting. It's not only temperature, precipitation, or wind that we are forecasting, but it's more the impact of the weather, where this artificial intelligence can play a role. And for example, in your case, when you have these typhoons hitting your country, one can estimate what kind of damage there's going to be, and you can target certain activities according to those. And that's what's happening in the developed countries today. And we have to transfer that know-how also to less developed countries to maximize the economic impact of our work.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to the Q&A section. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
May I invite Professor Charlie Ding, Associate Dean, Partnership of the Faculty of Construction and Environment, to join us. Professor Ding, please.
Hi, hello, good morning to you all. After hearing the very wonderful presentation by Professor Taalas, now it's our chance to have some dialogues with Professor Taalas. So if you have any questions to ask, or if you have any comments to make, now is our chance. I understand there are some secondary school students in the audience. It's very pleasing, really, to see that the younger generations actually care about the world we are living in. And they are concerned about the issues we are discussing today. So can I propose we reserve the first question to the secondary school students, if you have a question. I can see some of you are here. Do you have any questions to ask?
Former secondary school student.
Right. Okay. Perhaps you can think about it, and we will give you a chance to ask more questions later. So the first question will be asked by Professor Chi. Yeah.
I have a simple one, because your last sort of part is talk about the impact-based weather forecast. And in Canada, especially in Toronto, we already say today the temperature is 25 degrees, but it feels like 32. How do you do that?
So that's so we have to. If you go to this impact-based forecast, you have to deal with the customers of those services, and it's a dialogue between the users and customers of the data and the Met services. How you develop the impact-based forecasting, and that's what the audience and the customers actually need. And here in Hong Kong, for example, you have been able to develop world-leading expertise in aviation services. The cooperation between Hong Kong Observatory and Cathay Pacific, it's great, and it's a great example for the rest of the world. And by using the services of Hong Kong Observatory, Cathay Pacific has been able to optimize its usage of fleet, and they have been able to achieve both savings and they have been also able to enhance the safety of flights, as an example.
Yeah, Professor Tang would like to ask the second question, so I have to give this chance to my boss. Okay.
No, only if we're waiting for the students. But a question I have is, what you do has to rely on having data, lots of data, and hopefully data, accurate data, right? But gathering accurate data sometimes is a real challenge. And of course, when people think about this problem, most of the time they think about gathering accurate data from developing countries because their system is not well developed. But I think recently, okay, even in perhaps one of the most advanced countries, what happened in Puerto Rico, it seems like we are having a tough time just to have access to accurate data concerning the damage to Puerto Rico. So how would your organization deal with a situation like that?
That's a good question, and what has been the WMO has had two very specific roles in gathering the data. First, one of the reasons why WMO was established, or IMO was established in 1873, was that there was need to standardize the observations that were made in worldwide. So if you use different methods for observing pressure, which is, for example, a very important parameter for the flights, without accurate pressure measurements, we would have lots of accidents in the air traffic, and also it was important to standardize the measurements of temperature and, of course, all the weather parameters. And only by standardizing the observations we can have this global network. And the other nice thing of WMO, besides this setting the standards, is that we are freely exchanging data. So we have real-time free exchange of data, and that has been valid even during the days of Cold War. Despite of political blocks, we have always been exchanging all the observational data freely, and that's the backbone of weather services. We couldn't have the global forecasting models run without that kind of input data, and more recently satellite data has become highly valuable. And this impact issue, that's another story. And again, what kind of impacts we have seen in for example, Caribbean islands because of the record-breaking hurricane season last year. That's something where we are working together with various communities, and many other communities would benefit from our experience, how we exchange data, and we are also exchanging know-how fairly freely. For example, you have world-leading expertise here at the Hong Kong Observatory, and many other WMO members are benefiting from that expertise. And this LUI Wu Prize finance will allow, again, exchange of that know-how in an optimal way.
I can see a question from here.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. You had some financial information in there. You showed great vulnerability to Africa. You also showed that the GDP will be most worstly affected globally in the same area. On the other hand, in terms of extreme events, you demonstrated that the highest damages were essentially in richer states. Now, this creates, in meteorological terms, if you want, a separation about the interests of the northern hemisphere in better prediction of extreme events and reducing vulnerability for these events. Do you feel optimistic that climate change obligations will be honored by the northern countries? Because from what you've shown, they don't really have an interest in climate change. They're going to benefit from that.
That has been the discussion. I'm originally coming from Finland, and I also have been watching the discussion in Russia, and it's very well understood that some of those countries are already gaining. I could show this IMF graph with the green colors showing that high northern latitudes have already been benefiting because of higher temperatures and more precipitation, which is enhancing the growth of forests, and it has been also already meaning longer period, longer growing season for the agriculture and less need for heating of the houses and so forth. But it's very well understood that those countries are also sensitive to extreme events, and there was, for example, 2010 summer, there was a heat wave hitting Russia, where they got 50,000 casualties and severe forest fires and peat fires, and that was changing the mindset up of some decision makers in that country. But nowadays, the economies and also the agricultural sector is so much interconnected that we cannot isolate the countries economically, although there are some current trends in some countries where they think that they could isolate their economies from the global economy, and this is very much the case in climate change. If the whole world is going to suffer because of climate change, it's going to have impacts also on those countries which might have some small benefits. In the end, those countries are not going to gain either.
Yes, please.
Taalas, may I ask a very simple and naive question on behalf of students and ordinary citizens? What can we do to prevent the climate warming, or at least to lessen the effects, and to save the world, or whatever is left of it?
Yeah, so we have. I think that this problem needs a solution from the governments and regional players like European Commission, and these governments are setting certain standards for how the energy is produced in a country. And in your case, for example, these coal-fired power plants may not be the long-term solution, and the government may also have an impact on the transport sector, what kind of vehicles you are going to use and how much you use public transportation. But individuals can also play a role here. So it's this means of transportation. We have environment-friendly solutions. For example, electric vehicles would improve the air quality challenge that you are having in the country, and at the same time we could have low emission solutions. Of course, if you produce your coal in Hong Kong based on coal, this does not help, but if in the future, if you have some other means of producing energy here, these electric vehicles would be one solution. And one sector where the individual consumers can play a role is the diet. So it's shown that the vegetarian diet is more environment friendly, and it may be also more healthy, and fish-based diet is also something, and if you have very beef-based diet, that's negative, especially from methane emission perspective. And consumer power is something that also the industry is very much looking at. During the past decades, we have changed our diet quite a bit. You print in the products what kind of calories you have and what is the content of each individual product, and my guess is that in the future we may see the carbon footprint printed in the products, and you can also make such choices, and also living, how much space you have and how you heat or cool your buildings. That's there you can have an impact. Here you are of course having big buildings, but in single family houses you can use geothermal heating structures and solar energy-based cooling structures.
In the interest of time, I think we have one more question, the last question. Just check the high school students. Do you have any questions to ask? Last chance. I can see a question from here. Can I give the chance to him? Sorry for that. Yeah.
Hello, Professor. I'm a PolyU student. And I want to ask, as we all know, the employment condition of the environmental protect is not so popular, such like the accountants or finance or some management. So I want to ask, does the WMO make the effort to provide more the employment chance for us young generation to devote ourselves to protect our the earth?
Yeah, so WMO is a scientific and technical organization, and we are not the political player, so we are not giving instructions to individual governments how they should behave, but we are having this kind of giving this kind of information available for decision makers and for the general public, and they can withdraw certain conclusions from such material as I was just showing. And the good news today is that also private sector and finance sector has heard this message, and I was just last week in New York listening to heads of state, and they are very much concerned of climate change, and the motivation has clearly has been growing to mitigate the climate change. And President Macron of France was hosting One Planet Summit, where they had also private sector actors from big US companies present and big European companies present, and also private sector is moving in the right direction. It's highly attractive to invest in renewable energy, solar and wind as an example, and also the use of electric vehicles and so forth. That's growing, and also the finance sector has started moving. They want to invest their resources, of course, in a beneficial manner, but they see that these new solutions are going to be also attractive from financial perspective, and of course they want to invest their resources also in a climate smart way. But even this financial attraction exists, and for example, solar and wind energy today, they're fairly attractive for the energy sector.
I can see there are more questions, but I think we have to stop here. So I would like to thank Professor Taalas for the very wonderful presentation and also for answering all the questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful Q&A session. Please be seated. It's such a memorable moment to take some good photos. First, may I invite the following guests to come up to the front. Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, Professor Petteri, Taalas. Mr. Alex Lui, representing Dr. Lucy Ward, founder of the Lucy Ward Prize. PolyU President, Professor Timothy Tong. Member of the Board of Governors, Lucy Ward Prize, Dr. Moses Chang Moji, and Professor Choi Lap Ji. And Chairman of the Prize Recommendation Committee, Professor Lawrence Lau. One, two, three, smile. Please stay at the front. May I invite the following guests to join us for another photo. Assistant Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, Mr. Zhang Wenjian, PolyU Deputy President and Provost, Professor Philip Chen, Mrs. Bettina Lui and Mrs. Millie Lui, PolyU Executive Vice President, Dr. Miranda Liu, Chief Executive Officer, Louis War Management Limited, Mrs. Stacy Tong, General Manager, Louis War Prize, Ms. Yvonne Lai, PolyU Vice President, Research Development, Professor Alex White, PolyU Vice President, Campus Development and Facilities, Mr. Andy Tong, PolyU Interim Vice President, Student Affairs, Professor Jeffrey Sun. Ready? Smile. Thank you. Please be seated. Dear guests, we want to take a big group photo with all of you. Please stay on your seat. Would the photographer please come to the front? Would the guests on the side please move toward the center? Ready? Smile.